It's live, wait.
Yeah, I know. Why is it live right now?
I just clicked it.
So early. We haven't started yet.
Okay lah. So that we know the internet is stable. At least we have one click through, right?
Everybody can come in.
Yeah.
Does anybody have the meeting app? Oh yeah, I have. Can one of you guys just fill in one of the forms and then just cover Facebook?
Oh, you're ready? So, Aaron, that's you, right? No. You feel like it? Yeah. You got this competitive thing going on.
I don't remember. I do stuff and then it goes over.
We haven't got it done with all this. I shall be right back.
Which motion are we doing? Where is Mahadev? Sorry. Wait, we're missing one.
Yes, we
We're missing a chair. Sorry. Chill out, everybody. The chairs in the bathroom.
Sorry?
I can do the ding ding. Alright. What? Watch. How is it funny? Anish, like,
Oh my god, I'm on TV.
Okay, so can we just ask the PM this question?
Oh, so much for formality. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Every day when you go home and log into Facebook, you are ceding some of your power as a human being, the power to conceptualize and live your life, to conglomerate media companies and ruthless advertising companies that are out to do nothing but dictate how you think. We are not going to allow you to continue to be victimized by something that acts on you at a subconscious level. Before we go anywhere in this debate, what are filter bubbles? Filter bubbles are an automated information streamline. Basically, they do 4 things. They keep records of your search history. They keep tabs on your social data. This happens when you sign in and create accounts where you have to enter your sex, age, and personal details. Sometimes, even if you don't create accounts, they can guess your personal details, such as your sex, race, and ethnicity, by your social history. They monitor things such as the frequency and the duration of certain websites you spend time on, and most of all, they monitor and keep tabs on your areas of interest. They know what you're into, and they know what you're not into. Basically, they have figured you out based on the things you do online. So how do filter bubbles act? What they do is they change your results. So for example, if I was typing in something on Google, they change your results to give you something that you think you want, and they filter out the things that you don't want. Basically, recently I posted up a Jimi Hendrix video. For those of you who are friends on Facebook, I'm sorry I keep doing that. But every time I post up Jimi Hendrix, the sidebar of Facebook is suddenly filled with guitar products and things of that sort. Every time I log in, I'm constantly being bombarded by things that I like to see, whether they're guitars or cute girls or all sorts of things. And I don't see things I don't want to see. For example, skateboarding doesn't pop up because I know if I skateboard, I'll break my knee and I never search it. But what they do essentially is they build an online avatar and dictate your online experience. They streamline this based on your subconscious thought, and that could be a real harm. In a bit. So why should governments take action in this situation? Do we have a mandate? Yes, we do. We say, if we have a mandate to infringe your privacy for utilitarian purposes, then we equally have a mandate to protect your privacy in ways we see best. Why, though, governments are so crucial here? Because Facebook, Google, and Yahoo have become so integral to your existence as a human being that you have to use it every day. That means it's become something of a public good in today's day and age. In the same way, in a moment, Mifsal, utilities are a public good, and public goods are always regulated by governments. But lastly, why do we need to hit social media now at this point of time more than ever? But what's it, Ching?
Look, you just contradicted yourself, right? You just said that when you search for Jimi Hendrix, you will get Jimi Hendrix. Maybe you'll have a pop-up, but you can tell those pop-ups.
Here's the problem.
Essentially, you get your product.
Here's the problem. Sometimes I don't actually search Jimi Hendrix. Sometimes the moment I hit the J button, Jimi Hendrix pops up. Sometimes my search is affected by things that I did before and the things that I might do earlier today. More on that later in the actual argumentation. Let's get the nitty-gritty out first. Now, why do we have to act now on social media? Why specifically social media? Because right now, social medias, through mergers and acquisitions, are building themselves up. They're becoming huger and huger. Google Plus has acquired Yahoo and all sorts of things, that they've become this vast network that needs to be regulated before it becomes too big for control. Establishing what filter bubbles are, what they do, later Mifsal, and why governments can and must take action. Let's get into my ideas. I want to talk to you about conceptualization. I want to talk to you about the harms these filter bubbles and advertising companies bring about. And before I get into the ramifications, yeah, what's up? Something's bothering you.
Those kinds of regulations are meant for if Google wants to funnel their searches back into their own products. But if they're just trying to make filter bubbles based on the user's preference and user's preference alone, why is that something that's wrong?
Look, when we say, and that's going to be our case, why is it wrong to do that? Getting into it. But look, what we say is that these media companies have to take active steps in one, stop acquiring information in your databases and stop using that information to generate my online experience. This includes those companies taking an active step themselves and also preventing advertising companies that they affiliate themselves with from putting in softwares that do that also. Why though? Because, here it is, ladies and gentlemen, every day, wherever you are constantly being bombarded by advertising. Through billboards and through TV shows, advertisements are targeting you. That's why every time I see an Eclipse advertisement, there's an incredibly good-looking guy, much like Jason Wee, who can't get any girls. He's just walking around, but the moment he pops that Eclipse, hottest guy on the block, all the girls are flocking to him. That makes me feel like maybe I need to eat Eclipses to be cooler. There are all sorts of little things in the like billboards and media companies that affect your conceptualization of life a little bit. Now, the difference is that billboards and TV shows don't make those conceptualizations for you. They, over time, affect pre-existing conceptualizations. The difference with filter bubbles is they do the thinking for you. This is because 3 reasons. 1, you're exposed directly to it every day. A lot of us here spend more than, 3 hours on Facebook? Jasmine is looking guilty. And we do that every day. So we're constantly being exposed to things like that. Secondly, we're being exposed to these things from an early age. Right now, we're logging on to Facebook when we're 3. Jasmine? And when we're 3, up to when we become adults, we are constantly every day being bombarded by these subtle alterations to your conceptualization. This is the most harmful part. You like the process. It's pleasurable. You enjoy continuously seeing Jimi Hendrix and cute girls appear, and you're generally likely to keep going to it. You're generally likely to keep exposing yourself to it, and that causes you to be so immersed in your virtual reality that it gives them the ability to get behind your head, behind your subconscious, and build conceptualizations for how you are supposed to think. 2 things can happen. It gives huge amounts of power to advertising companies to sell you their products. It's very hard to not buy something they've been telling you to buy all along. But 2, and the more pernicious harm, this is a bit of conspiracy theory, but it allows government to control you. You will constantly be locked in traditionalist and ultra-conservative thoughts because simply when you don't do the thinking, someone will do the thinking for you. It's like the old adage, if you don't take a stand, you're likely to fall for anything. And governments and ultra-traditionalists will seize that opportunity to make you think what they want you to think. Conspiracy theory number 1. But more than anything, the effects of this are subconscious and they're dangerous. They affect you as an individual. It's kind of like that adage about the frog in lukewarm water. If you put a frog in boiling water, it jumps out immediately. If you put it in lukewarm water and slowly turn the temperature up, the frog is fried before it even knows it. We want to avoid more fried frogs. We don't like eating frogs, and as a result, please, please, please get rid of filter bubbles. Thank you.
Thank the speaker for his speech. We now welcome the leader of opposition.
Yes, yeah. So Ron, if you're watching this, you need to do a lot of work. That's a horrible speech from the WSDC team. Just kidding. I'll be there anyway and join you in your training some of these days. Ladies and gentlemen, that was a good speech. But there were a lot of things that were missing in that debate, especially the characterization of filter bubbles. Just so you know, things that he spoke about were not filter bubbles. Those were pop-ups, suggested searches, and in principle, advertisement. We're not going to defend it, Madam Speaker. This debate will be about filter bubbles, and we will argue with the bubbles is important. Before that, few things. What is our stance from opposition? That our stance is very simple. The state should not force or invade upon Google, Facebook, and Yahoo, and filter bubbles are beneficial to facilitate the efficient use of users, and more importantly, if the policy continues, it will diminish the relationship between user and service provider. To be clear, what do we support in opposition? 3 prongs. A, that users having the ability to decide on what they prefer and to opt out of that system. And this is already prevalent in status quo, where the privacy setting can be clicked. You can ignore it if you don't want the privacy, filter bubbles to be used. Therefore, you can control whether or not filter bubble can still be there. And B, we support the recent legislation of no longer allowing them to do so, of allowing the right to be forgotten to be implemented by the European legislation. And therefore, which also illustrates that users have the control. And C, we also support Google. We also support them not using it as a filter, funneling upon your own, and not actively using it for the reader. What are we against, Mr. Speaker, Madam Speaker? That Google funneling it all the filter bubbles to their own good, as opposed to the user to use it for their own preferences. But even more importantly, this has already changed the status quo. When the Supreme Court has held it against them, Google has changed it ever since in 2011 and no longer funnel the results of filter bubbles for their own good or for the users, Madam Speaker. But more importantly, in the end, it's very important to remember that filter bubbles are what you like to see and what you click in the past. Therefore, filter bubbles will suggest things that you prefer and things that you want to see or need to see, Madam Speaker. And lastly, what are we against, Madam Speaker? That state invading the free market of ideas as well as the forced internet use. Nicely moving on to my rebuttals, very few rebuttals. Number one, that like I said earlier, those things are not filter bubbles, those are pop-ups, things that you can already click, or if you don't want to see it anymore, and those are suggested searches. But in any case, Madam Speaker, suggested searches are good. Because for example, if you want to search for psychotherapy, but you do not know what you want to look for psychotherapy, then there will be searches on what you should search with regards to psychotherapy. Therefore, suggested searches are good, and we don't see the harms of it in any case. Second, to justify that the state can invade upon Google and Facebook because it is a public good. But wait a minute, sure, Facebook is one that everyone can use. However, filter bubbles particularly isn't a public good. Because like I said earlier, filter bubbles are one that will be generated based on what you searched in the past. Therefore, it is not a public good, Madam Speaker. And the moment state invade upon filter bubbles will also mean that the state is invading upon what you would like to see. And especially if your choice is to allow Google to tell you what you want to search and or even to have filter bubbles in the first place, Madam Speaker. Therefore, you can't invade, and that justification is not enough. Third rebuttal with the argument of conceptualization. That's an argument against advertisement. But more importantly, Madam Speaker, if like for example he told you that if I said Jimi Hendrix before, and what will come out later are for example things like guitar about to be sold. Those are advertisement, Madam Speaker. Therefore, if you want to take them out, by all means, filter bubble, do not do that, Mr. Speaker. And lastly, more importantly, that this is what he said. The argument is that with filter bubbles, they will do the thinking for you. That's not true. But more importantly, is that you are so immersed in a virtual reality and you get controlled by Google. My response is that's Illuminati and that's not filter bubble. But more importantly, he also branded as a conspiracy theory that government will control your mind and make you an ultra-traditionalist or something like that. First, tell us how exactly that works, because you already label it as a conspiracy theory. But more importantly, even if that's the case, people can always opt out to not become an ultra-traditionalist. I come from a very religious family. I'm not important. I want to have a couple of arguments, Madam Speaker. The first argument is, what is it? Internet and why filter bubbles are good for the user. 4 prongs. A, Madam Speaker, let's understand the internet. It's a maze. It's a bank full of knowledge and information, and it's not easy for you to just navigate if there's no any form of assistance from Google. That means you want to look for something and you don't just go to Google or Facebook and scroll down unless you're Nishan. I don't know, but you will not be able to navigate through it if there is no assistance whatsoever, because there are so many information upon it on Google and Facebook. Second, Mr. Speaker, when individuals want to search for something beyond the ordinary of what is suggested by filter bubbles, they can always opt out. That means if you were suggested to search for Jimi Hendrix, for example, you can always search for other guitarists like Mankida, for example. That's a Malaysian guitarist anyway, Andrea. Therefore, Madam Speaker, that option is within your hand. And the argument that filter bubbles are bad for you and will dictate how you feel is not true. Because filter bubbles do not dictate how you what you want to search or prefer, because in the end, your inspiration are not invaded by Google's, because you were the one who searched for Jimi Hendrix in the past. There were chances are you probably like guitarists, but even if at that point in time you no longer like to play guitar, you can always opt out of it and search for other things. So filter bubbles do not invade your privacy or choice in what you want to look for. Before I move on to the other 2 prongs, I'll take up yours.
So like I said, if you're looking for
physiotherapy online and you suggest places I should go get physiotherapy, why do you assume those places I want to go? Why do you make that assumption for me and as a result make me more likely to go to the places that I don't want to go?
Look, even if that's true, we can always opt out of not going to those places, even if it was suggested. The same reason why if I tell you to speak better, if you don't want to speak better later, then that's your choice completely. Two other problems. Number one, filter bubble are found from your own choices. I said that already. And lastly, sites. This is very important. Sites that get the most amount of viewer are popular, are a reflection of what people like to view in the past. That means even if filter bubble are used to get you to other sites that are popular, like for example the place that you want to get the physiotherapy, for example, that is only a reflection of what a lot of people would like to go and have clicked before. Therefore, it shows that it's to some extent supports majority democracy, like probably everyone else would like to do it. But more importantly, you can opt out of that idea of democracy, and you can always not go to that site or that place if you don't want to. The conclusion of this argument, Mr. Speaker, that you have the choice and you need that to navigate in the internet because it's a vast or huge place and you will get lost if you don't do it, and you can always opt out. The second argument, Mr. Speaker, is how will this affect Google and Facebook? Because let's understand, that's very sensitive in nature. That particularly when it comes to Google and Facebook, they make money mostly based on their efficiency of connecting people to one another, be it to another company or be it to another user. Madam Speaker, 3 prongs of harm the moment you do so. Number one, it harms the signature service of Google and Facebook. Because in status quo, they are already being deemed as that facilitator or the consolidator of users and connecting people to one another. Second, they make money out of it. And the efficiency of that service, like PayPal, for example, that depends on how well you connect with one another, buying something from eBay, will be greatly affected the moment you invade them and no longer allow them to use filter bubbles. And lastly, you take away the trust that people have towards Google and Facebook. Because right now, the government is telling you that it's bad for you to have filter bubbles and to not trust Google and Facebook. And especially when it's already exists paranoia amongst people that hate through NSA, for example, and do not want to use Facebook and Google. For all that, we oppose.
To anyone who wants to marry Matt, you have to know he's not very good with kids. Okay. Sorry, Matt. Okay. Few rebuttals. Number one, let's look at their policy. They support the right to be forgotten. They support an opt-out policy. First response, this is a principle concession that to a certain extent there is some problem here. But the second response is even if individuals like these filter bubbles, even if they like it, these suggested searches, there is a social harm to only being exposed to ideas you like. Yeah. And this is what Nishant is trying to tell you. That even if you do like that filter bubble, there's a social harm to being trapped within only what you want to see, being trapped in only what you want to search. And that is our case here. We're not talking about, it's about privacy or your direct personal, it's not necessarily working with the people. We're trying to say that it's a better society we can build where people are exposed to perspectives beyond what they want to be exposed to. But third of all, by default, people don't opt out. Do you opt out? Do you actually go and control your privacy settings? No, you don't. The default position of an individual is to not opt out. Hence, if you support an opt-out policy, that is not going to be effective at all. We think that by default, at the very least, there should be an opt-in policy, but we don't support it altogether. We don't think this entire idea of filter bubbles is anything beneficial to society or beneficial to the individual in the long run. But the second question you need to ask is, what exactly is a filter bubble? Because this is what he thinks it is. He thinks that when I search, my search is going to be related to popular searches. That is not a filter bubble. Okay? He's talking about searches based on popularity to guide you through that vast universe and tell you which websites are better and whatnot. There's nothing wrong with that. That's usually a good way for you to navigate the internet. But this is what a filter bubble is, and this is why we don't like filter bubbles. Filter bubbles are things that lead you back to websites you already visited, lead you back to ideas and websites you want. For example, if you're a racist bigot, you're always going to be going back to the Daily Mail UK. That's what a filter bubble does. Because it tells you that we know that you're a racist bigot. Tell you what, you're probably going to like the Daily Mail UK better. That's not very nice. We don't approve of that. So what is a filter bubble? And this is why I have to repeat Nishant, because you totally forsake him here. Sit down. This is what a filter bubble does. Number one, it bases off your history, your sign-up data, the frequency you visit websites, and it builds an online persona. Go to Google, search for your virtual profile, see how they guess your age, see how they guess your gender and your interests. And what did they do with that data? Number one, they nudge you to search certain terms. They have a suggestive search that goes contradictory to what popular search does. Number two, it also, when you actually click the button and view the page, your search results are within a range that they think you would like. They prioritize certain websites, they prioritize certain data they think that you want to read. That is what a filter bubble is. It is not just about popular searches and the most popular websites and what's most relevant to your search, because that's common sense. This is locking you within that bubble. Filter bubble. No, thank you. Final argument. This was an argument that brought up very late about efficiency. We think it's more efficient when people are exposed to products which are outside their current interest. This allows them to develop new interests, and this can even be more lucrative for other companies like PayPal, whatever. We don't think that just because you're going to be a bit slower to find those products, it's going to be so bad. In fact, it allows people to open up potential to explore newer areas of life, to live a better life, to create a society that's beyond what you know right now. Yes?
Let's place the same burden on you. If you're talking about the very same races and you remove filter bubbles, would you search for anything other than what you wanted to begin with?
Well, here's the thing. If you're a racist and you look for racist articles, at the very least, under our policy, you're met with a variety of websites. Websites you may not have visited before. If you have filter bubbles, you're going to go back to those websites you visited before. You're always going to go back to the Daily Mail. You're always going to go back to Fox News and all those other ridiculous websites. Because why? Google knows that you like those websites. That's why they're going to bring you back into that filter, into that bubble. We don't think that something's good. So this is my argument. How filter bubbles compartmentalize and segregate individuals, and thus it poses a social harm. No, thank you. This argument will do a few things. It will show to you that regardless of whether individuals like these filter bubbles, it is not something we should approve of. It will also show to you that this is an overall subtle social harm that is not beneficial to our society. Let's get a bit of context for this argument. Number one, the person you are in real life is increasingly becoming intertwined with the person you are online. This is because, number two, your online life becomes a source that feeds you information on a daily basis. And this is information that will shape you who you are. Search engines are no longer a passive participant in your life. They're actively shaping what you should search for and the kind of person you should become. But moreover, thirdly, this is all very subtle. And I have to say this, in debate land, we only acknowledge clear and direct consequences. We need to think beyond. This, in real life, the subtle ways we construct society is just as important as the clear and direct consequences. I urge you to look at the subtle way in which filter bubbles are controlling us and locking in our societies, not just the clear direct consequences that they would try to override. So let's go on to the second level. How exactly do filter bubbles lock individuals into archaic mindsets? Number one, your ability to garner information outside your current perspective is limited. Why so? Your past search history will dictate your future searches. If you search for something in the past, you're more likely to find information in the future that relates to searches you did in the past. And that is harmful because it does not allow an individual to progress intellectually and to gather data that's beyond what he found in the past. But number two, no thank you, you are actively being profiled into things such as gender and age. You can actually view your online profile on Google, at least they're nice enough to do that. They will guess your age, they will guess your gender if you do not sign up and provide the data for them. And when you search in the future, there are certain characteristics that genders and ages like to search for, and they will position your search results in tandem with that. Go try it out for yourself. Number two, your searches in the future will lead you back to websites you've already visited. And we told you Daily Mail, Fox News, probably not something you visit all the time. Okay? In other words, your search range is limited, the information you take in is limited. This is locking an individual up. But number two, you are more likely to search in accordance with what others search. And a very good analogy for this is if a child is sharing a computer, the parents, when they search on Google and Yahoo, they're probably going to be nudged in the same direction as what their parents are searching to. The very subtle use of filter bubbles nudges individuals back to their shell. You cannot break out of your current perspective as easily as before. So even if you like this, this isn't right. What is the harm, finally? Number one, individuals with archaic, outdated views are kept within the safe zone. It's not just a conspiracy theory. Sorry, Nishan, like maybe don't know the right way to say it. Okay? But it's not just a conspiracy theory. This is how you become an ultra-conservative person. When you're constantly kept within this bubble that says that these are the information you should know. You're never exposed to views that contradict yourself because Google knows that you don't like to be exposed to views that contradict yourself. This, ladies and gentlemen, is the harm that filter bubbles pose. As a society, we cannot allow society to be constructed in this way. We're very proud to oppose these filter bubbles. It's not as trivial and direct as you think it is. Ladies and gentlemen, I think that this may be the next episode of The Matrix. Ladies and gentlemen, the side of government seem to think that when companies or Google suggest to you certain sites, for example, you've already searched up the term psychotherapy. And when Google provides you 10,000 options, or even just 10, ladies and gentlemen, apparently you're funneled into one particular option, or they dictate to you or get behind your head some psychotherapy thing that some apparently Google voodoo that they do over the net. Right? Ladies and gentlemen, we think there's a little bit more than mindless drones behind the person that's holding the mouse, ladies and gentlemen. I'll clarify to you that in my rebuttals later. First and foremost, I think the main concern of government in this debate is that human beings are creatures of habit, ladies and gentlemen. And I think that most of the time individuals already travel within the same social circles or the same kind of information that they do under status quo. Anyway, you're not solving that problem under that side of the house. But secondly, ladies and gentlemen, without the internet and without the Google search site that I have suggested, they're not just suggesting one. For example, if you search very specific terms like Jimi Hendrix, when did he die, they provide you thousands upon thousands of options for you to choose from. So even if the search engine provides you the information at the top spot, the one that you're looking for, the many myriad of options at first sight that you get still provides a myriad of options for you to choose from. Thirdly, ladies and gentlemen, is that even if you want to search for something out of the ordinary, ladies and gentlemen, for example, I don't know what search site he's talking about where you just type in J and apparently they type in some random site apparently you've never searched for. But even if you want to search for something, let's say if you like Jimi Hendrix, you want to search up Eric Clapton, ladies and gentlemen, they still give you a myriad of suggested sites there. That suggested sites and the kind of filter bubble that's provided services for your already pre-existing preferences also exists if you have new searches in status quo, ladies and gentlemen. So that preference system is not mutually exclusive. But lastly, and you think that they needed to answer this question in this debate, ladies and gentlemen, can individuals fundamentally opt out of this imaginary bubble? Apparently, I think they live in the twilight zone, because it's not like Google dictates your choice, for example, clicks the links for you, ladies and gentlemen. Even to the extent there is advertisements or many of the other things that maybe invade your view of the topic that you want to look at, ladies and gentlemen, those sort of things are already within the user's control to filter out. For example, Google heavily advertises your right to control your own privacy and filter out things. In fact, they send you emails to make sure you change your password all the time, ladies and gentlemen. And in those instances, we don't see why Google nudging you into the direction that you wanted to be nudged to begin with, ladies and gentlemen, is so horrible when many of the other options are also available at the same time. The fundamental question here is, if those options are created, or that filter bubble is created by your own choices, then fundamentally Google isn't dictating your choices, you're dictating the same social circle that you want to be in, ladies and gentlemen. So we don't see why that's fundamentally or principally a harm on that side. Secondly, apparently filter bubbles, I don't know why it's still a question, how is it shaped, and I don't know why Aaron wanted to challenge this. Ladies and gentlemen, I think fundamentally speaking, we just need to accept that filter bubbles are made by your own preferences according to where you have visited, ladies and gentlemen. So it's not as Nishan said as his speeches went down toilet, a dictation apparently from Google, Yahoo or Facebook, ladies and gentlemen. But secondly, ladies and gentlemen, they never wanted to engage with Matt Substantive when he told you that when you want to search for something out of the ordinary, your inspirations don't come from your search sites on the net, ladies and gentlemen. For example, if you see something controversial on TV or many other things in life, ladies and gentlemen, you're very able to search it up online later on. And we think that that's very important to note in this debate. That means your options in terms of your inspirations for things out of the ordinary are not dictated or even manipulated by Google in this debate. We think that's extremely important. Please respond to that. Before I go any further, yes sir.
If I search gay sex is wrong on Google, under your side, I'm going to have a list of ultra-conservative websites on my first front page. Sure. Under our side, we're going to have a list of opposing views to make you know that maybe there's a view you should challenge. Which is better?
Ladies and gentlemen, if you look for gay sex is wrong, then most probably you're going to get search sites saying gay sex is wrong, right? So in that instance, I don't really see how Google is going to give you, unless they want to defend Google giving you information that you don't want, then in that instance, I don't see why that's good for their business in this instance, right? So
I don't know where they are in this debate. So let's go on to my substantive, ladies and gentlemen. In terms of users and how does it help or harm users with their particular policy. Their main concern in this debate is with the niche users or niche companies that want to access the market in terms of providing variety in this instance. I'll tell you and answer that question. I'll tell you why. Under our side, with creating preferences, it makes it easier for people with niche interests to be able to invade the market and to invade certain monopolies within the market, ladies and gentlemen. For example, when you have certain niche markets in society, for example, you are a startup company or offering a product that's new in nature, ladies and gentlemen, something that probably society hasn't heard of before. Or you have a view that isn't particularly accepted in society. For example, you support LGBT rights in an extremely conservative society. In those instances, it's much easier for you to be able to find like-minded individuals or your consumers, ladies and gentlemen, to be able to get that support structure that you need. Under your side of the house, it's an individual supports the LGBT movement in an extremely conservative society. If they are using the same computer as their parents, who are conservative, most likely they'll never be able to see those preferences in that instance, because it'll get muddled up and balanced out with the majority of homophobic individuals compared to the minority view, which is LGBT supported individuals. With the preference system, at the very least, Google can detect that you are an individual that is oppressed and a minority within a myriad and a whole maze of views that contradict yours, and at the very least you'll be able to find like-minded individuals and gain the support structure under our side of the house. Under your side, you leave minority groups to sift through the maze of information on their own. More often than not, these individuals get apathetic to search through the information. Ask anyone to go through the myriad of data that governments provide to search through their budgets or the accountability system. They say no, or individuals are apathetic to search through the information because there's just too much information on the internet. Fundamentally, at the end of this debate, you'll have to acknowledge that the internet is a maze of infinite information, ladies and gentlemen. And acknowledging that information, it's how do we make the search a lot easier for individuals and facilitate choices no matter how small they are. That option can only exist if we help them along in that journey. Thank you very much.
Anyone else? Yeah, cool. This debate is going to boil down to one very simple question. Are there any exclusive needs for filter bubbles that they want to fight for, versus are there harms that you can avoid if you implement our policy that you don't have under their side because they want to keep fighting for something that isn't a necessity, plus they made several very, very bad concessions. I'm going to analyze this debate from three perspectives. Firstly, how do filter bubbles actually function? Because MIF and MED still haven't got it. Secondly, does the government have a right to intervene? Why should we intervene? And specifically in the case of social media, why the social engineering that happens in this circumstance is so bad? Thirdly, what are the harms versus the benefits? Let's deal with the first. Can we invade this? I thought I was going to have to come here and argue. Matt did my work for me. His benchmark for evaluating the metric of whether or not we can infringe this privacy was that the state is invading the free market. Precisely, the definition of a free market is no control. By virtue of having filter bubbles, that is private conglomerate control upon the market of free information. So what the state is doing here is stepping in to avoid interfering in the free market. That's something that we want. So given that their metric was not interfering in the free market, since these companies are the ones who are interfering in the free market, we have every right to do so. Then he told us that these are not filter bubbles, these are pop-ups. I understand why he gets the difference between filter bubbles and pop-ups. He probably spends too much time on porn sites clicking close when they pop up on his porn feed. Oh, do you watch porn too? I'm so sorry. The problem would be that in the case of the difference between filter bubbles versus pop-ups, there is a very fundamental difference. A filter online deals with your privacy. A filter bubble literally generates preferences based on the type of information you search for. They generate social circles. They take the entire experience of being a human being and place it online because they want to keep you coming back. he raised a very important point that Google advertises the right to privacy. Yes, Google has a perverse incentive to make sure you are private, because if you aren't careful with your information, other companies have access to the information. They can gain the ability to use the information you give to Google to engineer their own products. So that sort of thing falls under their side. First question, do we have a right to do this? I already told you that based on their own benchmarks we do, but more important than that, Nishant's analysis about why we do have a right to do this was largely ignored from their side. Given that this plays such an integral role in the way humans shape their everyday lives, we think that we have every right to do this. We do this with many other things in life. The state always interferes. Yes, Matt, before I go on.
In any instance, sure, we agree that the state intervene when there's a corporate control
Okay,
over
great.
your filter bubble. But in this instance, filter bubbles are made by your own preferences.
Ah.
How the state dictating your
Okay.
choice, like Nishant said.
Okay, that is the assumption they made on that side. That it's only taking your own preferences and continuing to channel those in the searches based on those preferences. That's not how filter bubbles work. If Google generates a profile that says based on this search, you are likely to have X preferences, they apply those preferences not just to that search, but to every other search that you make. In other words, if I search for this information and Google generates this preference, if I search for other areas of information, they also generate those. Here's the tension on their side. They claim that people would search for their own preferences anyway, that we don't need filter bubbles to achieve that effect. My question is, if people are going to search for their own preferences anyway, then why do you need filter bubbles to channel them in that direction? Literally, their only argument for enabling filter bubbles was that it would enable people to better navigate the internet. But if we accept their own analysis that you don't need it because you're going to search for it anyway, then you don't need filter bubbles because people have a perverse incentive to search for their interests. What we get on the our side is that the kind of results that are displayed, the kind of experience that you get, isn't filtered and channeled in a certain direction that is socially engineered based on the preferences that Google thinks that it should display to you to keep you coming back. No, thank you. Matt told us two things. Firstly, that it's not easy to navigate. Well, that's an argument against the stupidity of human beings. In fact, we are very proud to say that if people can't search for information because they don't know how to filter it themselves, then it's a vital skill that they learn if we don't have filter bubbles. It is very important for people to be able to search for information. It's very important for people to be able to streamline information. That's something we get under our side because we make people search in that way. Secondly, he told us that you harm Google and Facebook because you're taking away their revenue. That argument concedes that they actually make revenue through filter bubbles. That means that they're not just channeling it to users for the user's own good, they're channeling back to themselves for the profit of that company. So everything he told you about the way they operate isn't true on pattern, because if we accept that analysis, the linear logic to build that up is that in order to make a profit, there has to be some benefit channeled back to yourself. So if we accept that analysis, then it falls short because they told us that they wouldn't want to do that. They told us that the right to privacy was important, but clearly they don't stand for that, because Mifzal's entire analysis about minority groups, I don't know how gays came into the picture somehow, was predicated on this instance. He told you, no, that wasn't a response. He told you this: filter bubbles are important for individuals to be able to interact with other like-minded individuals. How can you fight for the right to privacy, yet give people the ability to know if other people are gay and connect with them online? Either you fight for privacy or you don't allow people to expose that information online. That's not true. But my question is this: why on earth do you need filter bubbles to help gays connect when we have all sorts of gay rights organizations in real life anyway? What are organizations like the Rainbow Group for? Those organizations already serve the purpose with all the stuff that Aaron talked about and all the harms of social engineering through filter bubbles. That's why we think it shouldn't stand. Final question: are the benefits that they wanted to fight for truly exclusive? Because they had to prove this. If they want their case to stand, then they need to show us why the benefits that they want to fight for can exclusively be gained. That was something that they never ever proved. Literally every single thing they talked about was a benefit of having better streamlined information, not a benefit of filter bubbles. Here's why. Assuming that what they say is true, that filter bubbles give you a way to streamline information, the first level of response to that would be that people should have the intelligence to filter results themselves, and even if they don't, the process of discovering the information that they want when they search for that information is a beneficial one. When you have to filter through ideas, when you have to look at opposing sides of the coin, when you have to decide what kind of results are relevant to you based on the information there, that is a very good process. You get exposure to other forms of interest, you get exposure to contrasting views. That's what Aaron was telling you. The fact that they don't lock you in and dictate preferences, and therefore you get exposure to the full spectrum of views, is a beneficial thing, especially where discourse is concerned. But secondly, that assumes that people actually need this. We would posit that it's far more likely that people don't need this, especially since, as he considered themselves, if I want to go and search for something specific, I will. The question for the average reasonable person is, in all other circumstances, when I'm browsing the internet and my leisure time, how then are my search preferences dictated? In those circumstances, that's where the case falls short. They only dealt with a specific circumstance. They are the ones who have no exclusivity or benefits. At the end of the day, this is a form of nebulous social engineering that shouldn't happen. We are very, very proud to stand for the true free market. We are very proud to propose.
I really wanted to go first in this debate. I really, really did. But I'm glad that I went third, Madam Chair, because obviously you need the girl to come up and clean up this debate from side government, Madam Chair. A few things before I move on. One, we think that side government can't operate on a small definition to what they think the debate is. Number two, they can't come up and insult my teammates' preferences of porn, specifically one person, Madam Chair. Three assumptions they made in this debate. Number one, that individuals will be locked in a bubble forever. Number two, that Google and Facebook and Yahoo will dictate your choices. And number three, bubbles will actively change and shape a person. I think these guys have spent way too much time playing Dota or whatever it is that guys without girlfriends do on the internet, Madam Chair. Because they told you the biggest attack on their side is that because we consider that individuals who want specific things can always opt out anyway, therefore that's a concession, what you need to consider on your side is this. When an individual goes on the internet and has a general idea to what they necessarily want, and the framework of the internet is so large and you need assistance to that, why is the filter bubble so bad? Because they told you things like individuals will be accepted. This means it. They told you that individuals will be accepted. We don't agree, right? Let's look at a few things. And I'm quite weirded out that this still has to be brought up. What are filter bubbles? Because they told you these are Google and Facebook and Yahoo dictating choices onto you. We disagree. We think that it's a bubble, number one, based on things that you like, and the kind of information is streamlined to what you like, as opposed to what Google thinks you like. Even if it's what Google thinks you like, it's dependent upon the things that you have searched, therefore it's assisting you anyway. I don't understand why that's two different things, right? Even if we think that the kind of preference that you have and the one that Google can calculate for you is never stagnant, Madam Chair. Why? Because individual preferences change all the freaking time. Yeah. If you like one porn one day, it might change a different day altogether. That means the filter bubble isn't as stagnant as they make it out to be. That it will change depending to what you want and what you look for. This means it. But even if it's the preference that never changes, they told in their speech that it's a likely preference that individuals want. We think that this is a large concession in showing that it's still dependent upon your choice at the end of the day. They told you that we need to prove there are exclusive benefits. Let's go into it. What's good for the users, Madam Chair? Because the largest contention on their side is that it dictates choices onto individuals. They say that it makes you choose only what they want you to read, and people are locked in. Number one, we told you multiple times that individuals don't get locked in. At the end of the day, you can still opt out and turn off filters and all those things. But even if you can choose not to click on those links, even if the most extremes you can accept, the individuals can turn off their laptop, Madam Chair, if they don't think that it's something that they necessarily want. What they miss is a characterization from Matt that he brilliantly pointed out to you, that the trend that is moving right now is that individuals within society or legislation is taking into consideration that individuals can make choices online and that they have the right to be forgotten in terms of what they necessarily do online. Even if you can't opt out, Madam Chair, the history searches, or when you go online on a browser, you can always opt to go incognito. For example, if you want to use porn, if you want to watch porn on your parents' computer and you don't want them to find out, these are ways that you can opt out for your information being streamlined into a specific thing. Sit down. This means that even at the expense of you not opting out, you can still disallow individuals to track information with your own control. We don't think that individuals are dictated choices. But secondly, they told you it creates an environment of inception. But what we need to understand understand on site government is that all their examples are extremely extreme, right? Because let's analyze how society thinks. Because they told you if an individual goes online and looks up things like how do we kill homosexuals, or what is the best way to try and make met and myth find religion in this instance, we think that even in that instance, these are individuals who are already operating on that framework that they either want to kill homosexuals or they want to make people convert into a certain religion. Even if, Madam Chair, we think that these are individuals who can still make those decisions. Your life isn't a bubble outside of the internet. When you go out, the individuals that you interact with shape those choices anyway, Madam Chair. We think that even if you are imprinted those values, the internet doesn't mitigate that harm. We think that is very important. But second component, they told you that your life will be streamlined, and Tabesh said you should learn how to use the internet a lot better. Guys, this is the very reason why we created the internet to begin with, so we don't have to sift through thousands and millions of information in the library in order to ensure that our life is a lot better. We think that they have nothing other than multiple theories that wasn't necessarily proven. But even if, what we need to consider is that you have access to an efficient system that is facilitating you in your day-to-day activities. What kind of food do I want to eat? What kind of porn do I want to enjoy? How do I make my sex life better in that instance? We think that this efficacy makes it a lot easier for individuals. Yes, Ashwara, it can help you as well, right? But secondly, let's look at how they told you that a compartmentalized society. But before I move on, I'll take Nishan.
Oh, man, if I buy a chair from IKEA, I don't want to look at the manual. I want to build a chair. So at the end of the day, when I'm sitting in my shitty IKEA chair, I know I built it. If you don't let me do that, you're detracting something from my human...
Sit down. Even in that instance, right, IKEA assists you as well by giving you a manual that you can look at in order to ensure it's more of an efficient system. If you want a shitty chair that will break apart, then so be it, right? But me and Jasmine want a proper bed to sleep on, Madam Chair. We think what you need to start considering is the kind of harms that you inflict onto the services. I took the better one. Sit down. Because what we need to understand on site government is that they're demonizing Facebook and Yahoo and Google and make them out to be like the assholes in this debate. And we disagree, Madam Chair, because what was the characterization that Matt and Mif brought up in this debate? That these are conglomerates or corporations that provide a signature service. What is that signature service? That they connect individuals across boundaries that exist within the world. The reason why Facebook is able to sustain itself long after Friendster and MySpace and High Five and all these other weird websites is because they're able to provide that efficient signature service in connecting individuals, Madam Chair. This means that they are the provider within society. But even if, why can't states intervene in this matter? Because Tabesh argued to you that conglomerates are controlling you. But we disagree. We point out in an example in the Supreme Court of the United States that individuals right now, that Google has to understand that the preference cannot be what they think is best for their company, but it also has to be to what the individuals want. That's why it disallows all searches to link back to Google-related companies and allow individuals to have the choices that they want. We think that this is a weird argument. But lastly, we think, Madam Chair, in order to cater to a growing market, what you need to understand is to allow corporations to be able to access market as they choose to do so. We think that the kind of monopoly that you have on their side is extremely one-sided, like the boys as well, Madam Chair. At the end of this debate today, it's quite clear that side government lost this debate simply because they're living in a world of conspiracy theories, Dota, and no girlfriends. We are supremely proud to oppose.
We now welcome the opposition reply.
Ladies and gentlemen, fundamentally in this debate, there are just three issues, and I'll go through them pretty simply. Number one, I think the most basic issue in this debate is how do individuals form their preferences? Because I think that the running presumption under the side of government is that apparently looking at links under your Google search site immediately changes your frame of mind to only opting for one particular search site in the world, ladies and gentlemen.
never engaging in the many levels of analysis under the side of opposition in regards to the variance of exposure that you get outside your computer, the ability for you to have suggested sites for any other out of the ordinary search that you have, or the ability for you to have millions upon millions of searches even though you have a specific search name under Google. And in those instances, there are many and a myriad of ways of individuals being able to shape, change, as well as modify their preferences in society, ladies and gentlemen. So we don't really see that the principal contention on government in this debate happens because people can change their minds. In fact, the contention on them is that apparently, and I think it's a real big case shift, that Nisha initially alleged that apparently Google gets behind your head and tries to shape your views for you, apparently, ladies and gentlemen. But how they form these bubbles, essentially, ladies and gentlemen, are formed by information that you voluntarily give to information sites to begin with, ladies and gentlemen. That means that if you do allow Google to know or Facebook to know that you are a woman, that you prefer cats over dogs, or things like that, that's information that you volunteered into the net, ladies and gentlemen, knowing that you know that the information will be used later on. Adding to that, ladies and gentlemen, you also know that the information will be used later on to shape your preferences. That's why in my speech I told you the amount of information campaigns that Google makes to make sure you know how your information is going to be used later on. Many court cases that happen under status quo clearly illustrate that people now know about that instance, ladies and gentlemen. So the conclusion to that first issue is that people know about how your information is being used, people can change their minds, and people are very much aware about your options in dealing with that information and how Google isn't able to shape your practices for you. Secondly, ladies and gentlemen, is the bubble. Because I think that it's really strange that government in this debate seem to want to contend that really the bubble, all it is just a manifestation of all your choices that have been made in the past. The essential question to ask here is, does the bubble change, ladies and gentlemen? Because if your choices also change according to all the other inspirations that you get in the other of your life, the bubble is very willing to change according to your new preferences as well. We don't think they engage with us on that level. But secondly, and here's where we perfectly conceded, even if in the instance where you can't change the bubble and say like your choices never change at all, we engage with that as well. In those instances, Google is not an actor that prescribes variety. Google is not an actor that prescribes diversity. In fact, Tevesh considered that Google is not an actor with moral codes, ladies and gentlemen. They are a service provider that provides you a service for what you want in order to find the information that you require, ladies and gentlemen. For in those instances, even if you're an LGBT individual in a conservative society or a conservative individual in a liberal society, if you want to look for information, then Google should be able to provide you the information that you want, ladies and gentlemen. That's their service. But fundamentally, the last issue is, and this received no response from Tevesh in this debate, is that if really, ladies and gentlemen, that Google is a service provider that connects and facilitates information across people in a myriad of instances across the world. And to sift through that information, ladies and gentlemen, is an abundance or an infinite amount of information. How do you connect minority groups, or how do you connect people who necessarily will be drowned out by the myriad of information of the infinite choices that exist under status quo and never be heard? If you are indeed a minority group, if you are indeed a person trying to breach the market, you will be drowned out by the millions of searches or the millions of links that do not correspond to your niche market. And that is why a filter bubble will facilitate your choices and your choices alone. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is a side that got a majority of the debate wrong. We concede like they got part of the debate right, but let's look through a few problems. First question I have, what exactly is this debate about? Because we had a lot of conceptions that just didn't produce a rich and meaningful discussion. Number one, it's not about people having trouble navigating the internet. And we clearly told you, Google already helps you find relevant and credible websites that match your searches. But filter bubbles override this process. by leading you back to results that Google think will agree with your views, as you've done with your search history, that agrees with your gender, that agrees with your age. That is what a filter bubble is. It's not about navigating the internet. Naturally, when you a search engine will lead you to relevant and credible websites. This is about filter bubbles distorting that process and leading you to things that you think you would like, when in reality, maybe that's not the best information for you. Number two, this is a debate about forming worldviews. It's not necessarily about selling products, though that has some relevance. This is about forming worldviews. When our online persona becomes who we are as individuals, what is the best way to grow this persona? From adults to kids using a parent's computer, what is the best way to shape an individual to allow them to expose themselves to beyond what they already know? They didn't really engage with that. And this, thirdly, is a debate about subtlety. Yes, we agree, people will change their minds. No shade. Yes, people will break out of their bubble. We don't deny that. The possibilities will always exist. But this is not what the debate is about. When you change your mind in this instance, it's done against the system. The question on our side was, how do we create a system that best shapes and forms your ability to truly find out about the world and discover about the world? On their side, changing your mind is something that requires active effort to go out there and breach the system that is already trying to confine you within that bubble. Outside that bubble doesn't exist. You change your mind a lot easier. So ultimately, this is a debate about how we best shape society, how we best expose people to things that truly make up the life worth living. And this is not just about a micro perspective. It's not about what you want. It's not about what you want to look at. It's about what society would be best at. So let's look at their world. What are the benefits under their side? We can see there are a few benefits. It's going to be more convenient. It's going to be more comfortable. It's going to be a lot nicer to see articles that you really like to read because it's all from the same websites you visited in the past. That's convenience. That's your comfort zone. That's your safety bubble right there. But you also can see there are some benefits when it comes to minorities forming niches, but there are a few problems which you already stated. Number one, when it comes to actively fighting against the system, people do it regardless of either side. So minorities fighting against majority, you're actively going to find results that agree with you anyway. But this is a debate about the subtlety. Instances when individuals are not actively going against the system. How then do we shape the system? So here's the problem. And it ultimately comes down to this one question. Very simple question. I don't mean to sound flippant. But if I type into Google search today, is gay sex wrong? Under their side, this is what's going to happen. I'll be led back to websites that are familiar to me, websites that already tell me that being gay sex is wrong. I solidify this archaic and outdated worldview. Why? Because I'm stuck within the worldview, and Google helps me be stuck in that worldview. Under our side, if I search is gay sex wrong or gay sex is wrong, this is what I get. I'll get a diversity of views. I'll get one article from Time magazine telling me why the statement is gay sex wrong is bigoted. I'll get another statement from Fox News that tells me maybe it's okay. This is what we want. We want individuals to be exposed to the variety of information out there. This is how you form your worldview. This is how search engines such as Google, Yahoo, and to a certain extent Facebook act as social benefits of society, where they can use it to shape and gather information that they think will be useful to their identities. Not to be stuck within this vicious cycle where whatever I know right now will forever become what I always know unless I make an active step to break the system. We want to shape that system, and we're proud to propose.
It's fine.